The formal study of compliance focuses on the specific psychological factors that cause one individual to agree to a request made by another. While initial laboratory research on college subjects identified core psychological principles, a complete understanding required investigating compliance professionals, salespeople, fundraisers, recruiters, and advertisers whose livelihoods depend on securing agreement. Through extensive participant observation, infiltrating sales organizations, advertising agencies, and fundraising groups, compliance tactics can be synthesized into 6 foundational principles: consistency, reciprocation, social proof, authority, liking and scarcity. Material self-interest, the drive to maximize benefit while minimizing cost, underlies all decision-making but acts as a motivational baseline rather than a distinct weapon of automatic influence. Modern life presents an increasingly complex stimulus environment, compelling human beings to rely on automatic, mindless compliance patterns. Click, whir responses that trigger pre-programmed sequences of behavior. An exhaustive analysis of human compliance requires examining the ethological and cognitive mechanics of automaticity, followed by a detailed breakdown of the principles of reciprocation, reciprocal concessions, and commitment and consistency. Part 1. The mechanics of automatic influence. Human compliance mechanisms mirror the fixed action patterns observed in animal ethology. Ethologists have documented that animals execute intricate, mechanical behavior sequences, such as courtship rituals, parental nurturing, or territorial defense, in response to specific, isolated trigger features rather than evaluating an environment holistically. Ethological foundations and trigger features in animal behavior. These automatic responses allow organisms to respond efficiently to environmental demands without expending valuable time and mental energy analyzing every individual situation from scratch. The trigger feature acts as a precise switch that releases an entire sequence of complex behaviors. The maternal instinct of mother turkeys. Mother turkeys exhibit protective maternal behavior, governed almost exclusively by the cheep sound of baby chicks. Other features such as smell, touch, or visual appearance play virtually no role in releasing maternal care. In experiments conducted by behaviorist M.W. Fox, a mother turkey was presented with a stuffed replica of a natural enemy, the polecat. Under normal conditions, the mother turkey attacked the stuffed polecat fiercely, squawking and clawing at it. However, when the stuffed polecat was fitted with a small recorder that produced the cheep sound of a baby turkey chick, the mother turkey gathered the polecat underneath her body and brooded it. As soon as the recording stopped, the turkey attacked the stuffed predator again. The single sound feature overrode all visual and historical evidence of danger. Territorial defense in robins and bluey-throats. Male robins defend their territory by aggressively attacking an isolated clump of red breast feathers placed in their space, while completely ignoring a stuffed replica of an adult male robin that lacks red breast feathers. Similarly, male bluey-throat birds react aggressively to specific shades of blue breast feathers placed within their territorial boundaries, ignoring other morphological cues. These automatic responses are highly adaptive because trigger features usually correlate with factual reality. In nature, only healthy baby turkey chicks emit the cheep sound, and only rival male robins possess bright red breast feathers. However, automatic patterns leave organisms vulnerable to mimics, predators, or parasites that fake trigger features to exploit mechanical behaviors for their own benefit. Photoris fireflies. Female Photoris fireflies crack the distinct courtship, blinking code of male Photinus fireflies. By mimicking the exact light signal sequence of receptive female Photinus fireflies, The photorous female lures eager male photinous fireflies into a fatal embrace, capturing and consuming them. Saber-toothed blenny fish. The saber-toothed blenny fish takes advantage of the mutualistic relationship between larger predator fish and small cleaner fish. Cleaner fish execute a specialized undulating dance that signals their identity, prompting large predators to enter a passive state with open mouths, so the cleaners can pick off parasites. The saber-toothed blenny mimics the precise dance of the cleaner fish, inducing the passive immobility response in the predator. Once the predator settles into its calm state, the blenny swims in, bites off a chunk of the predator's flesh, and darts away before the victim can react. Human automaticity and heuristics. Human beings possess parallel automatic behaviors driven by learned psychological principles and mental heuristics. Because modern society saturates individuals with complex, rapidly changing information, cognitive shortcuts are essential for efficient daily function. Humans cannot carefully analyze every person, product, or proposal encountered daily. Instead, they rely on heuristics to make quick decisions. Philosopher Alfred North Whitehead noted that human civilization advances by extending the number of operations performed without conscious thought. Psychological trigger features in human automatic compliance occurs when a specific stimulus triggers an immediate, unthinking agreement. The because trigger. Social psychologist Ellen Langer demonstrated human automaticity in a classic field study involving library copy machine lines. When a researcher approached someone waiting in line and asked, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the Xerox machine because I'm in a rush?" 94% of people complied. When the request lacked a stated reason, "May I use the Xerox machine?" compliance dropped to 60%. However, when given a circular reason containing no actual information, "May I use the Xerox machine because I have to make some copies?" compliance rose back to 93%. The word because acted as an automatic trigger feature, releasing an unthinking compliance tape, regardless of whether a valid justification followed. The expensive good heuristic. An Arizona Indian jewelry store owner struggled to sell high-quality turquoise jewelry during peak tourist season, despite placing the items in a central display case and instructing sales staff to push them aggressively. Before leaving on an out-of-town buying trip, she left a scribbled note for her head saleswoman to mark down the display items, price X12. The head saleswoman misread the hurried handwriting as price X2 and doubled the prices. Upon returning, the owner discovered that the entire inventory of turquoise jewelry had sold out at twice the original price. Uninformed vacation shoppers had used the heuristic expensive good as a shortcut trigger feature to assess quality. Wanting quality goods but lacking the expertise to evaluate turquoise value, they relied entirely on price as a proxy for quality. Discount coupon automatism. An automotive tire company mailed out promotional discount coupons that contained a printing error. Due to the mistake, the coupons offered no actual price savings to recipients. Nevertheless, the response rate to these error-filled coupons was identical to the response rate for error-free coupons, offering substantial monetary savings. Consumers relied on the visual format of a coupon as a mental shortcut, expecting the physical coupon to automatically provide financial savings without doing the math themselves. The contrast principle and psychological Jujitsu compliance practitioners operate like martial arts masters using Jujitsu, structuring requests to engage existing psychological forces with minimal personal effort. Rather than using brute force persuasion, they exploit natural perceptual biases. A foundational perceptual mechanism used in this manner is the contrast principle. The contrast principle states that, If a second item is presented after a first item that differs significantly from it, the observer perceives the difference as far greater than it actually is. In psychophysics experiments, if an individual places one hand in cold water and the other in hot water, and then places both hands into room temperature water simultaneously, the hand that was in the cold water experiences the room temperature water as hot, while the hand that was in the hot water experiences it as cold. The physical temperature of the middle bucket remains constant, but perception is skewed by prior sensory input. Real-world applications of contrast attractiveness perception. Research conducted at Arizona State and Montana State universities revealed that exposure to unrealistically attractive media models skews the perception of average dating partners. Male college students rated photos of average-looking potential blind dates as significantly less attractive if they evaluated them while watching television shows featuring highly attractive actresses, compared to students watching unrelated programs. Retail clothing strategy. High-end clothiers train sales staff to present the most expensive item, a high-priced suit, first. Once a customer commits to purchasing a $495 suit, a $95 sweater or high-priced accessories seem inexpensive by comparison. Presenting inexpensive items first backfires by making the subsequent suit appear far more costly. Real estate setup properties. Real estate agencies maintain rundown, overpriced homes on their inventory known as setup properties. Salespeople show prospective buyers these dilapidated, high-priced properties first, ensuring that the actual homes on the target tour appear far superior and reasonably priced by comparison. Automobile sales options. Auto dealers finalize the baseline price of a vehicle before introducing sequential options like tinted windows, warranties, extended service contracts, or trim packages. Relative to a $15 zero baseline car purchase, individual $100 or $200 add-ons appear trivial, allowing total sales prices to expand significantly through sequential contrast. Application in personal communication. A college student named Sharon illustrated perceptual contrast in a letter to her parents, detailing a fake dormitory fire, a simulated skull fracture, fictional pregnancy, and a fake engagement with a boyfriend, before revealing that she had actually received a D in American history and an F in chemistry. By contrasting her academic marks with personal catastrophe, her parents viewed the poor grades with far more leniency. Part 2. The rule of reciprocation. The rule of reciprocation dictates that an individual must attempt to repay, in kind, what another person has provided. The linguistic tie between expressions of gratitude, thank you, and statements of obligation, much obliged, reflects a deep cultural expectation of indebtedness. Sociologist Alvin Gouldner confirmed through cross-cultural research that every human culture subscribes to the reciprocity rule. Anthropologists Richard Leakey, Lionel Tiger, and Robin Fox argue that the web of indebtedness is the defining adaptive mechanism of human social evolution. An honored system of future obligation allowed early humans to share food, tools, shelter, and specialized skills without fear of permanent loss, giving rise to trade, division of labor, complex interdependencies, and social coordination. Societies enforce the rule through negative social sanctions, labeling non-reciprocators as moochers, ingrates, or welshers. Long-term cultural force. The Ethiopian-Mexican exchange, the enduring force of reciprocity, was demonstrated in 1985 when the government of Ethiopia sent $5,000 in relief aid to Mexico City following a catastrophic earthquake. At the time, Ethiopia suffered from widespread starvation, economic ruin, and severe famine. The Ethiopian Red Cross sent the funds because Mexico had provided diplomatic and financial aid to Ethiopia in 1935 when Italy invaded the nation. Half a century later, the obligation to reciprocate transcended geographic distance, cultural differences, and acute domestic starvation. The overpowering strength of reciprocation in compliance settings. The rule of reciprocation possesses sufficient power to override other psychological factors, including whether a target likes the requester. The Dennis Regan experiment. Dr. Dennis Regan of Cornell University conducted a study where subjects rated the quality of paintings alongside a partner named Joe, who was actually an experimental Confederate. The experiment featured two main conditions. Unsolicited favor condition. Joe left the room during a break and returned with 2 bottles of Coca-Cola, costing 10 cents each, handing one to the subject unasked, stating that he bought one for himself and one for the subject. Control condition. Joe left the room during the break and returned empty-handed. Later, Joe asked the subjects to buy 25-cent raffle tickets to help him win a $50 prize for selling the most tickets. The results were striking. Subjects who received the unsolicited Coke bought twice as many raffle tickets as those in the control group. Regan measured the subject's personal liking for Joe via rating scales. In the control condition, liking strongly correlated with ticket purchases. Subjects who liked Joe bought more tickets than those who disliked him. However, in the Coke condition, personal liking was completely eliminated as a factor. Subjects who disliked Joe bought just as many raffle tickets as those who liked him, because the sense of obligation dictated their choice. Field implementations of reciprocation. Hare Krishna, benefactor before beggar strategy. During the 1970s, the Hare Krishna Society faced public relations and financial hurdles because the public disliked their appearance, robes, and public chanting. Rather than changing their religious aesthetics, they altered their fundraising tactic by applying reciprocation. In public airports, Krishna solicitors pressed a gift, a flower or a copy of the Bhagavad Gita, into a traveler's hands, refusing to take it back. "No, it is our gift to you." Only after establishing an unrequested gift did the solicitor ask for a donation. This strategy generated massive wealth, funding temples and properties worldwide. Travelers adapted by actively avoiding solicitors or throwing flowers directly into trash cans, where Krishnas retrieved and recycled them. Political exchange. Political logrolling reflects reciprocity at the legislative level. President Lyndon Johnson passed comprehensive early legislation by calling in scores of favors accumulated over decades in Congress, whereas President Jimmy Carter struggled despite Democratic majorities because he lacked established political debts. Political donations by corporations operate on stockpiling obligations, as acknowledged by Charles H. Keating, Jr., regarding the $1.3 million he donated to 5 U.S. senators during the savings and loan disaster. Retail free samples. Free samples engage reciprocity under the guise of product information. An Indiana supermarket operator sold 1,000 pounds of cheese in a few hours by inviting shoppers to cut off free sample slivers for themselves. The Amway Corporation uses the Bug, a collection of full-sized household products left at a prospect's home for 24 to 72 hours at no cost. When distributors return, customers feel obligated to purchase products they partially consumed during the trial period, driving massive sales surges. Survival and interpersonal examples. During World War I, a German trench raid expert crossed no man's land to capture an enemy soldier. He surprised an enemy soldier who was eating bread. The startled captive gave his captor a piece of bread, triggering the reciprocity rule so powerfully that the German soldier released him and returned empty-handed. Diane Louis escaped the 1978 Jonestown mass suicide by consistently refusing special food gifts from leader Jim Jones while sick, stating that she knew once she accepted privileges, he would own her. The rule enforces uninvited debts. Reciprocation does not require that a favor be requested for obligation to take root. The rule requires only that an individual receive a favor. Anthropologist Marcel Mauss identified 3 distinct cultural obligations surrounding reciprocity: the obligation to give, the obligation to receive, and the obligation to repay. The obligation to receive degrades an individual's ability to choose their debtors, placing control in the hands of the requester. In Regan's study, Joe selected the initial favor, a Coke, and the return favor, raffle tickets. Similarly, mail campaigns by the disabled American veterans show that standard donation appeals yield an 18% response rate, but adding unsolicited gifts, gummed address labels, nearly doubles compliance to 35%. Asymmetric and unfair exchanges. The reciprocity rule allows small initial favors to be exchanged for substantially larger return favors. In Regan's experiment, a 10-cent Coke yielded an average purchase of 2 25-cent raffle tickets, returning 500% on investment. A young woman recalled jump-starting a stranger's car in a parking lot. 1 month later, the young man asked to borrow her new car for 2 hours. Driven by lingering debt, she lent him the vehicle, which he crashed and totaled. Unequal exchanges occur because of the internal discomfort of indebtedness and the threat of external social shame. Indebtedness creates psychological strain that individuals seek to discharge rapidly. Furthermore, failure to reciprocate risks public rejection as a moocher. Women frequently report feeling uncomfortable obligations when men pay for expensive dates or drinks. Studies confirm that accepting drinks from a man leads both men and women to judge the woman as more sexually available to him. Part 3. Reciprocal concessions and the rejection-retreat tactic. Reciprocity governs compromise through the obligation to reciprocate concessions. When an individual alters a demand from larger to smaller, the target perceives the shift as a concession and feels compelled to respond with a concession of their own. The practical application of this mechanism is the rejection-then-retreat technique, also known as the door-in-the-face technique. To secure compliance, a requester first makes an extreme initial request that will likely be turned down. Once refused, the requester retreats to a smaller target request, the item desired all along. The target views this shift as a concession and reciprocates by agreeing to the smaller request. Experimental proof. County Youth Counseling study. Cialdini and his research team tested the technique on college campuses, posing as representatives of the County Youth Counseling program. Control condition. Researchers approached students and asked if they would serve as unpaid chaperones for juvenile delinquents on a day trip to the zoo. Only 17% of students agreed. Rejection-then-retreat condition. Researchers first asked students to volunteer as unpaid counselors to juvenile delinquents for 2 hours per week for a minimum of 2 years. After all students refused this extreme request, researchers retreated to the zoo trip request. Result: compliance tripled to 50%. Structural mechanics. Contrast and safety margins. Rejection-then-retreat derives power from combining the rule of reciprocation with the contrast principle. The second request appears smaller simply by being smaller, but it also appears dramatically smaller due to comparison with the initial extreme request. Structurally, the requester cannot lose. If the target agrees to the initial request, the requester gains double. If refused, the retreat secures the true target request. Boundary conditions and limitations. Research conducted at Bar-Ilan University established that if an initial request is so extreme as to be seen as unreasonable or illegitimate, the strategy backfires. The target perceives the negotiator as acting in bad faith, viewing any subsequent retreat as an artificial trick rather than a genuine concession. Effective negotiators set initial demands exaggerated enough to allow multiple concessions, but sensible enough to remain credible. Real-world implementations television censorship. Producers Grant Tinker and Gary Marshall routinely inserted extreme, explicit lines into scripts solely for censors to cut, allowing them to retreat to the milder lines they actually wanted included. Marshall inserted the word "virgin" 7 times into a script for Happy Days, expecting censors to cut 6 and leave 1. Door-to-door sales referrals. Sales representatives turn purchase refusals into opportunities for customer referrals. Once a prospect refuses to buy encyclopedias, the salesperson retreats to a request for names of friends or neighbors who might benefit from the offer. Prospects often grant referrals as a return concession. Watergate break-in analysis. The decision by CRP, Committee to Re-elect the President, officials to approve G. Gordon Liddy's $250,000 Watergate break-in plan was driven by rejection-then-retreat dynamics. Liddy initially proposed a $1 million plan involving bugging, chase planes, kidnapping squads, and prostitution blackmail yachts. His second proposal retreated to a $500,000 plan. When he submitted his bare-bones, $250,000 scheme to John Mitchell, Jeb Stuart Magruder, and John Dean, they approved it. View $150,000 as a little something left as a return concession. CRP official Frederick LaRue was the only member to object. Importantly, LaRue was the only participant who missed the prior 2 meetings and was unaffected by contrast and reciprocity forces. Talking the top of the line. Brunswick billiard table retailers tested 2 sales approaches, showing customers low-end 329 tables first, and trying to trade them up resulted in an average sale of $550. However, showing customers $3, zeros-end top-of-the-line tables first, and selling down as they shopped led to average sales exceeding $1,000. Positive byproducts. Follow-through and satisfaction. A significant hazard of compliance techniques is target resentment, leading to non-compliance with agreements or refusal to engage in future requests. Rejection-then-retreat minimizes this risk and increases compliance execution through 2 psychological byproducts: responsibility and satisfaction. In UCLA bargaining experiments, subjects negotiated money division against Confederates using persistent extreme demands, moderate demands, or extreme then-retreat demands. The concession strategy yielded 3 outcomes. It produced the highest monetary return for the user. Heightened responsibility. Subjects facing the concession strategy felt most responsible for the final deal, believing they had successfully forced their opponent to take less money. Feeling responsible for dictating contract terms causes targets to fulfill verbal agreements. In a Canadian community mental health study, rejection-then-retreat increased verbal agreement to volunteer from 29% to 76%, while actual show-up rates rose from 50% to 85%. Greater satisfaction. Targets of concession strategies report the highest satisfaction with final arrangements, making them more willing to accept future requests. In a blood donation experiment, students persuaded via rejection-then-retreat agreed to donate again in the future at an 84% rate, compared to 43% for standard requests. Defensive tactics against reciprocation blanket. Rejection of initial offers is impractical and socially destructive, as it harms interactions with genuine benefactors. A child handing out free open house flowers was growled at by an old man who aggressively demanded to know what she wanted in return, ruining her experience. The effective defense against reciprocation relies on mental redefinition. Accept genuine initial offers, participating in the network of social obligations. If the initial offer reveals itself to be a commercial sales trick or compliance device, mentally redefine the offer as a sales tactic rather than a favor. Once redefined, the reciprocity rule ceases to apply, freeing the individual from obligation. If a home fire safety inspector provides a free extinguisher and inspection, then pressures the homeowner to buy an overpriced alarm system, the homeowner can redefine the extinguisher as a sales tool, decline the purchase, and keep the free item without lingering guilt. Re-articulating the situation enables exploiting the exploiter. Retail Reader Report. A TV and stereo salesperson utilized Rejection-Then-Retreat to hit service contract quotas. Company policy required selling service contracts on 40% of sales. The salesperson pitched the maximum 3-year plan, 141st. When rejected, he retreated to the 1-year plan, 34.95. This technique yielded a 70% contract sales rate, outperforming colleagues while maintaining high customer satisfaction. Part 4. Commitment and consistency. The principle of commitment and consistency relies on the internal drive to keep thoughts, words, beliefs, and actions aligned. Once an individual takes a stand or makes a choice, internal and interpersonal pressures compel them to act consistently with that commitment, convincing themselves that their choice was correct. Post-decision alignment racetrack betting study. Canadian psychologists evaluated individuals at horse racing tracks, observing that bettors were significantly more confident in their horse's chances immediately after placing a bet than immediately before. Placing the bet constituted an irreversible commitment that triggered the drive for consistency, prompting bettors to align their beliefs with their action. Interpersonal commitment. A woman named Sarah cancelled her upcoming wedding to an attentive boyfriend to return to her ex-partner Tim, who promised to quit drinking and marry her. Within a month, Tim refused to quit drinking or get married. Despite the original conditions being broken, Sarah became more devoted to Tim than ever, rationalizing that choosing him forced her to realize he was number one in her heart. The power of commitment. Mechanic psychologists Leon Festinger, Fritz Heider, and Theodore Newcomb identified consistency as a core motivator of human behavior. Inconsistency is culturally viewed as an undesirable trait linked to indecisiveness, dishonesty, and mental instability, whereas high consistency represents rationality, strength, and honesty. The beach theft experiment. Thomas Moriarty conducted a field experiment on a public beach to test consistency pressures. A researcher placed a beach blanket 5 feet from a subject, relaxed while listening to a portable radio, and walked away. A second researcher, acting as a thief, grabbed the radio and ran. In control trials, only 4 out of 20 subjects intervened. However, when the researcher asked the subject to, "Please watch my things," before walking away, 19 out of 20 subjects became vigilantes, chasing, tackling, and confronting the thief to maintain consistency with their commitment. Double attractions of automatic consistency. Automatic consistency acts as a powerful shortcut through modern cognitive overload, shortcut around hard thought. Once a decision is made, consistency eliminates the need to evaluate new information, weigh pros and cons, or expend mental effort. Turning on the consistency tape dictates automated action. Shield against disturbing realizations. Automatic consistency offers a refuge from unwelcome logical conclusions. Transcendental Meditation Lecture. Analysis. Cialdini attended an introductory Transcendental Meditation (TM) lecture with a university professor specializing in symbolic logic. The professor raised his hand and systematically dismantled the recruiter's theoretical framework, demonstrating its internal contradictions. Stunned, the recruiters admitted his points required study. However, the audience swarmed the stage to pay the $75 enrollment fee. One audience member explained that he was broke and failing college, but signed up immediately because he knew if he went home without paying, he would start thinking about the logic professor's arguments and never sign up. Paying money locked in a commitment, shielding him from reason and allowing him to play his consistency tape. Commercial exploitation. Toy manufacturers slump strategy. Toy manufacturers face seasonal post-Christmas sales slumps. Parents exhaust their budgets during December, leaving kids' post-holiday pleas ignored. Standard price drops or advertising fail to shake parental resistance. To combat this, major toy companies utilize commitment dynamics. Before Christmas, companies heavily advertise specific expensive toys on cartoon television shows. Children extract explicit promises from their parents to purchase those specific toys for Christmas. Companies intentionally undersupply retail stores with those specific toys. Parents visit stores, find the promised toys sold out, and purchase substitute toys of equal value to cover Christmas morning. In January, companies run the original advertisements for the promised toys. Children remind parents of their original promise. You said, forcing parents to buy the second expensive toy to maintain consistency with their prior commitment.